think like any other person who loves drawing, I drew art any chance I could get, whether it was on a random copy paper or in the middle of class. And it's at this point where I only ever drew anime. You could easily tell when I traced, and when I didn't. Drawing real people always led to questionable proportions, but because of school, art fell off for me and I stopped drawing for several years. So flash forward a year or two later and I reignite my passion for drawing when I see that a number of artists made a career off doing what they love, and I knew there was a low chance I'd succeed, but I wanted to take that chance. So summer of 2021, I headed off for the first year of college, and instead of buying a computer, I bought an iPad as a double way of doing coursework and to officially begin my art journey. Already, I was horrified to learn that digital art didn't actually make itself and you actually had to pick up the pencil and draw. Nonetheless, I was able to produce my first ever digital art piece. I was a fellow paint bucket user and I clearly loved big foreheads. Obviously, there was one big issue. I was self-taught, so I basically just did whatever. This is where I started using the most important skill, that being observation. I knew I wasn't drawing the face right, so I just looked at other fan arts and see how they were doing it. I would finally start using references where I would initially trace before I learned how to look off of references instead of directly tracing them. But I never liked the results of my full body poses, so for the next few months I only found myself drawing the head and shoulders only. This is where I found the most growth ever. It inspired me to finally start coloring my lifeless sketches, and by coloring I mean just spamming the airbrush and hoping it looks good. And while some actually did look decent, it was mostly just a way for me to play around with some of the basic brushes and the layer modes. This was in the middle of my phase where I would spam a bunch of YouTube tutorial videos on how to color, draw anatomy, and download a bunch of brushes. I would find myself doing a bunch of art hacks and staring at a bunch of 1, 2, 3 easy tutorials on Pinterest, but this led to one of the biggest turning points for me, and that was watching speed paint videos. And that's because it ignited my love for semi-realism, which I really wanted to achieve at that point. So this led to me watching hours and hours of speed paint videos, and for most of these, I convinced myself I knew what was going on. Spoiler alert, I didn't know what was going on. But it did help me create my first ever fully painted piece, which boosted my confidence quite a bit, except for the fact that it took me almost a week to make. Here I would find myself getting in the bad habit of comparing myself to better artists. My finished pieces weren't turning out the same as the one I had watched on videos, and it would be very demotivating, and I knew you shouldn't compare yourselves in the first place, but for some of us I feel like it's inevitable, but you have to use that as motivation, and that's exactly what I did. I knew the drawings behind my coloring needed improvement, so I spent some time away from coloring and I spent the next few months working on that. Remember earlier in the video where I said I only did the head and shoulders because I hated my anatomy? Well, I finally started focusing on the lower body and learning the anatomy parts instead of just relying on visual memory. At this point, it had already been over 6 months and we were nearing the end of the semester, and I felt like I spent a lot of time in other areas, so I kind of wanted to come back to coloring. I felt that I learned some new skills that would help aid my coloring, so I did my first coloring and okay, I wasn't really trying on that one, so for the next one, okay, time to panic. Okay, so it's pretty obvious that I sucked at coloring. What I soon came to realize what was known as rendering. So I did what any normal person would do, and I read the How to Render book, and it was insane. I finally learned how to I didn't learn how to render. Oh my goodness. Okay, so turns out you actually have to read the book? Okay, no, but seriously, I was making a crucial mistake that would hurt my growth. I was absorbing too much information at once instead of taking it into little pieces. With things like art, you have to be patient and take things slowly. I wanted to achieve results immediately, and therefore I would fool myself into thinking I understood some concepts when I really didn't. Like, I would watch a lot of videos about color theory, and instead of actually understanding and rewatching them, I would watch them once and be like, okay, and thinking I already nailed it down. I was very ignorant and impatient. See, later on, I would finally understand the concept of learning fundamentals and how it's a backbone of your work. My backbone wasn't as strong here, and it had a lot of holes. I usually saw this as a graph, and each bar would show my current level in each field, and I wanted to level up the other areas to an acceptable level. Of course, because of all this, I felt a lack of progress, and I didn't draw for almost 2 months in what I soon came to know as art block, and it was also to focus on college. The second year mark was closing in, but this time I wasn't going in blindly. I made a plan, I created a schedule, and most importantly, I set up goals. Whether your goal is to create amazing illustrations or to just have a career in doing something you love, it's something that only you can craft. My iPad days were over and I finally got a Wacom. With my new plan, I finally went back to the basics and I did figure drawing. This was a year where I thought I actually learned something when I began studying properly. The flow I developed from figure drawing helped create less stiff poses and nicer looking drawings. Combining it with some newly learned anatomy parts really helped add some spice to my drawings overall. I think it's safe to say that anatomy and figure drawing can get a little boring here and there, so spicing it up with some fan art and some original characters did help make it a little bit more fun. At this point, my schedule had me drawing 5 hours a day every week. Kind of. Obviously, I wouldn't have a chance to draw every single day, but my main objective was to draw at least 3 out of the 4 weeks every month. Using this time, I also finally read some books to help me construct the head using the Loomis method and various angles. And don't worry, I actually read the books this time. Kinda. I think studying the realistic depictions of these faces really helped to simplify the stylized ones later on, and it really helped to capture some expression and creativity. You can tell I also start to leave less sketch marks and focus on more large and broad, simpler, effective brush strokes to help create more readable and nicer looking drawings. When it comes to learning things like anatomy, I cannot stress the importance of using reference. Before I said I was using reference, but I wasn't using it properly. I would use it once and I'd toss it away immediately. I was missing something important, and that was repeat and repetition. A lot of the knowledge and references you absorb won't stick around for long. You have to get in the habit of repeating and practicing over and over. Don't draw 100 poses every single day thinking you'll learn anatomy by next week. You can learn by looking off of references and make your own connections, but you should also give yourself some time to draw it on your own without any help in short sessions, and this really helps you train and use your brain and helps retain information for a lot longer. I finally got back into rendering and coloring by painting some balls, lots of balls. It helped me to learn the importance of value and how it varies between shadow and light. It would help me start rendering materials which would be a little mediocre at first, but they would get better with more and more practice. The same pattern would follow with my grayscale studies. They'd be a little rough at first, but they'd start looking better and better with more and more studies. It's essentially just a trial and error phase where there's many failed attempts and some acceptable ones. That's where I think self-critique is the most important. Figure out what's wrong and how you can fix it. A year and a half had passed and I'd finally created a colored illustration that I was very proud of. From here on, I wasn't really afraid to color over my sketches, and I got into the habit of painting more regularly. I also did a lot of studies which helped elevate my artwork and also helped me to create a workflow. And that kind of leads us up to today, where I'm mostly doing the same thing essentially. At this point, I wasn't really concerned with my art style. I simply just wanted to elevate my artwork so that I can make cool, presentable illustrations. And when it comes to presentable, I was dealing with a lot of issues trying to actually post. Up until this point, I hadn't posted a single photo. I was very nervous, and I was dealing with a lot of imposter syndrome. I thought it wasn't good enough. And watching a lot of other artists post their stuff every day, even if they're in their earliest stages, made me get a lot of courage to finally start doing it myself. And even though it only has a whopping 2 posts, I think it's important that we all start somewhere, and I do want to set a goal to maybe post at least 100 by the end of next year. A little unrealistic, but having goals does help move forward. And I did really just want to end this video off recreating my first digital drawing. And I still have so much to learn. I still have a lot of struggling days, a lot of frustration days, because I still do just have so much more to learn. There's a lot of holes in my fundamentals that I still want to fill up, but I do know my mistakes are just building blocks to help make good stuff in the future. Nowadays, we have a lot of resources, luckily, and we need to make sure that not only do we use them wisely, but also put in the practice. But this is my journey. I still have so much more to learn from those who are better than me, and along with me, I hope you can continue to get better and evolve. And that's pretty much it. See ya.